Hey everyone, Taco here and I hope you're doing well. Today I wanted to talk to you about how the Nikon Z8 performed while I was photographing at the Luminato Festival for 2023. Now before I begin with the camera, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Little Amal, which was what I was photographing for the festival. Little Amal is a 12-foot puppet of a 10-year-old Syrian refugee who is traveling around the world across cities in hopes of finding her new home and engaging with communities, and has quickly become the voice of hope and those displaced around the world. She is controlled by puppeteers, one inside of her that controls the legs and the head and expressions of Little Amal, and one puppeteer per arm, which you can tell takes a lot of room. So maneuvering Little Amal around the streets of Toronto can be quite the ordeal. Nonetheless, we visited 14 different neighborhoods in a span of only 5 days, and it was a great experience to be able to follow her around and photographing her, engaging with the community, and trying to take the pictures that best depict the project itself. Now, there were no shortages of challenges when photographing Amal. Namely, she is 12 feet tall, so she's quite taller than the average person. So to photograph her in its entirety, I would have to be creative in terms of how to compose her with my camera and lens. Second, she is being maneuvered by 3 different people, and in addition, she has staff members surrounding her, making sure that the puppeteers do have enough space to perform their work. So it's not as if I'm able to be right beside her at all times. Thirdly, there is always a crowd wherever she goes. So trying to maneuver Amal and myself within that crowd can be quite challenging, especially if I wanted to take photographs of specific moments. Now, did I miss a few shots? Sure I did. But going into the project, understanding that I may not be able to get every single shot that I want, has me understanding that even if I did miss that one moment in time, I just move on to the next moment. And that was a great tip provided to me by the videographer of the project, and I thank him for letting me know that fact well before the actual event. So what gear did I take to photograph Little Amal? Well, I took both my Nikon Z8 and Z9 bodies. On the Z9, I paired it with the Z70-200mm f2.8, and the Z8, I paired it with the 14-24 f2.8. And that combination proved to be the best combination, as I was able to get that sweeping wide-angle view of Amal and the crowd at 14mm, but still be able to capture Amal in those intimate moments with individuals or herself with the 70-200mm. My main camera that I would be using the most was the Z8 with the 14-24 f2.8, because that was the most versatile, the lightest, and the easier to maneuver with one hand if I needed to in certain situations where I actually had to squeeze my camera and lens inside small areas in order to be able to take certain pictures. For pretty much 99% of the time on the Z8 with the 14-24, I had the viewfinder spread out like this, and I was using the LCD screen right on the back so that I could capture the puppet and still move around at the same time, in order to be able to not bump into people or static objects in case where I was moving back, because I did find myself walking or actually running in certain cases to be able to capture Amal at certain moments. So it was very convenient for me to be able to look at my viewfinder down like this or even up like this, and actually dynamically move around at the same time as Amal walked from point A to point B. There is very seldom times when I was actually using the 14-24 with my camera up in my eye. However, the opposite is true for the Z9 and the 70-200. 99% of the time with that camera, I'd actually be pointing it at my face and trying to capture moments that way, because I did have a little bit more time to be able to find those moments as I was a little further away from Amal. focusing. So typically what I have is my back button autofocus is usually set to some sort of wide area autofocus with subject detection set to the subject that I wanted to detect, whether it be animals or people. And my function 1 button on the Z8 is set to 3D tracking with subject detection set to whatever it is that I want to focus on. But in terms of Amal, her face is actually rather large in comparison to a normal person's face. So I found that the camera had no problems whatsoever in detecting Amal's eyes. So I didn't really need to use wide area autofocus. And instead I ended up changing the back button autofocus to 3D tracking, subject detection set to people, which is exactly what I had it set to for the function 1. So either of these buttons I could press with one hand, and I could actually move my camera around. As long as I knew that Amal's face was inside my LCD screen, then I knew that every time I took the picture, I would be able to get pin sharp images with Amal's face in focus. And sure enough, 100% of the times I was able to get that, and I was super impressed with the performance of the Z8 because of that. I was really running around in certain cases, and when that happened, I always tried to make sure that I had one camera in my hand with Amal somewhere in my frame, and when I slowed down and was able to actually compose Amal properly, I would take a few shots, and I had the assurance of knowing that her eye was already in focus because I had that 3D tracking button continuously pressed as I was running around beforehand. So those are the type of things that I usually look for when I am in a rush and running around at events and trying to take photographs during intense situations. Another option for the Nikon Z8 and the Nikon Z9 is menu option A5 for the Z8, that is, and that is store points by orientation. So by default this is set to off, which is pretty much what I use 99 or 100% of the time actually. And but if you have that set to another option, you have the ability to change the focus position and focus mode depending on if you're shooting horizontally or vertically. So when you change from horizontal to vertical, you can actually have the camera memorize the previous options that you had it set to, and it will actually change the focus position and focus modes based on what you had it previously set to. Now for my event photography, I never set this to any other option other than off. So what that means is essentially regular shooting is when you're shooting in landscape mode and you have a focal point somewhere on the right hand side, and I changed my orientation vertically counterclockwise, then that focus point on the right hand side will naturally go now on top of my screen. So the importance of this is if I had Amal's face on the right hand side, I would actually track her. If I found out that my 14mm was not wide enough, or I wanted a different version of that same picture in front of me, then all I had to do was actually switch the orientation just for the flick of the wrist while holding my 3D tracking button, and that automatically tracks the eye of the subject matter as I'm changing from horizontal to vertical. And because of that, I'm able to immediately capture images vertically, knowing that my subject is pin sharp, just because I'm able to 3D track that. And I can only do that with the menu option A5 set to off. So make note of that if you've never used that before. Burst mode. Did I use burst mode in my most recent shoot with Amal? Well, no, I did not. And the reason for that being is that I knew that Amal, as fast as she is walking, she's not super fast. She's not fast like a bird flying through the trees or whatnot. So there was no need for me to have 20 frames per second raw images, 10 or even 5 at that really fast frame rate. So instead, what I usually do is turn burst mode off and use just a single shutter mode. And I essentially just rapid fire on the shutter button as often as I need to, and depending on what she's actually doing, I can actually change that speed and rate of pressing the shutter button by myself. And that's what I've been used to doing ever since my D800 days, so that's actually what I continue to do even now. Even though I have the burst mode available, I choose to do it myself manually because I'm comfortable at actually changing my rate with my finger instead. Now, despite this, you would think that I would come out with fewer images, but I still actually came out with so many images, thousands in fact, a day, that I still have to go through and call all those images by myself, and that in itself was an ordeal, and another story perhaps to tell a little later. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this one photo that I took with the Nikon Z8 and the Z14 to 24mm f2.8. So this was taken well into the evening during a street festival in Toronto here, and I had my 14mm set to 14mm f2.8, shutter speed of 1/125th of a second, and at that my ISO was actually a whopping 25,600 because I was pointing in a relatively dark area, and it was actually pretty dark to begin with. Surprisingly, the 3D tracking still worked on Amal's face, so she was tack sharp, framed it according to what I wanted to take, and then I actually took the picture. Later on that evening, I looked at the picture, and sure enough, it was pretty grainy, but I pulled it in through Adobe Lightroom, and I actually put it through the Adobe Lightroom's new denoise feature, and wow, did that ever clean it up so well. So in fact, after I used the denoise feature, that's the image that you're seeing right now, and it turned out to be a perfectly usable image even at ISO 25,600. So with all these technologies advancements going on lately, you'll be pleased to know that even at 25,600 you may still be able to use your images depending on how it was shot or in what scenario you were in. So don't always disregard that high ISO image, because a lot can be done in post-processing even in Adobe Lightroom now. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my explanation of some of the features of the Nikon Z8 that have helped me during my last shoot with Luminato Festival and the Walk with Amal project here in Toronto. I do hope that you also enjoyed some of the pictures that I posted here on YouTube as well. If you want to see more of the photos that I took during that Walk with Amal project, it is all available on my website at www.smaku.com. Just head to my blog and go to the post with the Walk with Amal project. Let me know in the comments below what you liked about Nikon Z8's features that I used, or if you like my photos, please do comment on those as well. I very much appreciate every single one of those comments, and I do read each and every one of them as well. Thanks so much for watching my video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.